arrogance of collectors is believing that they are in control of their collection and not the other way around. Today on Outside the Box Reviews, we continue to celebrate the return of the King of the Monsters. And today we are looking at the NECA Godzilla 12-inch head-to-tail action figure. And NECA picked some very confusing terminology to cover their new Godzilla figures. They're doing this one that stands roughly 6 inches tall, but is 12 inches long. And in a couple months, we're going to be getting one that is about 12 inches tall and about 2 feet long. But this is the smaller of the two that NECA's doing. I just wanted to clear that out before we got any further into this review, but let's take a closer look at the figure. Now this thing does come some assembly required. This back section of the tail comes separate in packaging. There's a ball joint right here. You just have to pop the two together. It's a little tough getting it in there. I'm sure some hot water or a hairdryer would make things a lot easier. So if you're having issues, try that. And what can I say? NECA, their sculpting is great. I love it. They did a really nice job capturing tons and tons of details on this figure. Fortunately, unlike every other Godzilla figure from this movie I picked up so far, NECA seemed to not be limited to having rubberized bits all over this figure. And even if they were, NECA's gotten really good at capturing detail in soft plastic anyway, but we don't have the different levels of sculpting detail that we had on the Bandai America one. And after watching a couple other reviews on this figure, I was kind of getting a little annoyed because everyone's pointing out the fact that the head's a little small and that it's not a big deal. And I completely agree with that sentiment. I was intending not to bring it up until I compared this to some of the original designs for the character and the upcoming SH Monster Arts teaser images that have come out. And yeah, the head's a little small. NECA was most likely working off of the original prototype of the character, and it was before the head got enlarged. But NECA's got all the nice detail in there. We have his gold eyes with the black pupil in it. His teeth are individually sculpted and painted white. If we open up the mouth, you can see more detail, a pinkish purple interior and a dark reddish purple tongue in there. Very, very nice attention to detail. Scales sculpted all down the head. We have the kind of gills here at the side of his neck. And NECA gave this figure a bluish paint wash, which is coming up a lot better on camera than it does in real life, but it does kind of bring out some highlights and lowlights on the scales, which I think is much needed. A lot of the other figures I've seen of Godzilla, granted being of lower quality, have just been straight black on the back, and it really does make it hard to make out details. We also have all of his spines up here. These are softer rubber, which I think is kind of good because you won't break them if he drops or falls off a shelf or something, but they're very nicely detailed. They look really cool. They're what I'd expect on a Godzilla figure. Just great skin texturing all the way through. We come down to his underbelly and we have that tannish color running through it. Still a lot of great sculpting. His little dino junk down there, his big thick legs that are on this version, and the feet, my least favorite feature on this guy, but still movie accurate. I mean, NECA did a good job with the design they had. So these look appropriate if nothing else. But the skin texture is what blows me away. It just looks so great. I mean, it just looks like they cast crocodile skin onto this thing. We come down, we have the tail. Spine's continuing down the tail. The underside's a little smoother. It's really, really nicely done. For articulation, I'm actually really surprised how much is here. He has a jaw that's on a hinge so it can open and close. It doesn't open tons, but you do get a good enough impression of the movement here. He has a ball joint at the top of the head, which you can look a little up, a little down, and he can go side to side with. He also has a ball joint at the lower part of his neck that does just a little up and down, but you can get some additional side to side out of it. So if you use the two joints together, you can make a pretty organic looking turn in his neck, which I like a lot. His shoulders are on ball joints. They will go out to the side just a little bit there, and they will rotate around. There is kind of a groove down here where the arm can kind of rest in a kind of limp position there. So when he's just walking around, you kind of know where they're supposed to be. He has a hinge at the elbow as well as a rotation. He has a ball joint at the wrist. He has a ball joint at the mid-torso. Not tons of movement there, but you can get some side to side going on. You can get a little forward and back and a little bit of tilting action going on there. The The legs are on ball joints. They can swivel kind of at this V-cut shape angle, but you can also kind of move them in and out and twist them a little bit. So more than just the V-cut there. It does get kind of wonky once you start moving them around, though. You have some really disjointed looking hips if you're not careful, but if you get it right, you can almost just get them to sit back and go flush with the rest of the figure and look very nice. You can bend just a little bit at the knee. You can just kind of straighten it out a little more than normal and then bend it back, which is kind of the natural resting position of it. You can also swivel at the knee. You have a ball joint at the foot, so you can pivot it, move it forward and back. Not tons of range there, but enough, especially because the legs aren't that heavily articulated anyway. There are peg holes down there and some additional sculpting on the bottom of the feet, which is nice, even though the copyright info is down there as well. Then back here at the base of the tail, we have a couple actual ball jointed segments. So we have these 3 segments here that kind of work just like an SH Monster Arts tail would and can move on their own. They can rotate, all that good stuff. Now the whole tail seems a little heavy because it always kind of sags at this first joint for me. I can never really get it to sit up as much as I would like it to, which is a bit of a bummer. And then past those 3 joints, we have the section that we had to attach when we first got the figure, and that is of course also on its own ball joint, and it has a bendy wire inside, so you can bend Godzilla's tail any way you'd like. I'm not a huge fan of this setup. I'm sure it was a cost-saving measure, but in a way I would almost rather the whole tail be bendy wire and we just eliminate these ball jointed sections. I think it just makes it kind of awkward and just a weird shape. I understand that it would be expensive to give us a fully ball jointed tail, but obviously that's what I would really want, and I'm sure we'll get that on the Monster Arts figure eventually. And the articulation is good enough that if you wanted to, you can get Godzilla kind of laying down on the ground or in a swimming pose or something like that. So it's not the best, most articulated figure, but for what it is, for being a NECA figure and the limitations and the very inexpensive cost of it, it really is a well-made piece. For a quick comparison, here we have him next to the Bandai Creation Smash Strike Godzilla, so we can see he is a little shorter than that figure, but also a heck of a lot better looking. Here we have him with the Monster Arts Godzilla 2000. I feel like both of these Godzillas kind of rest at a similar angle. They both kind of lean forward a bit, so I thought this was a good comparison. You can see they kind of stare eye to eye. If the head was the correct size on this NECA one, it would look really good together, and they still do look like they belong together at least a little bit. Here he is next to the Monster Arts Burning Godzilla, who I have squatting down just a little bit, but they're fairly in scale as well. And his previous incarnation, the Bandai Creations Final Wars Godzilla, so those sit eye to eye as well. So this will fit with your Bandai Godzilla figures, which was a big concern of mine when NECA announced they were doing this line. However, ironically, they're not really in scale with NECA's other giant monster figures. If we bring in Trespasser from the Pacific Rim line, you can see that he dwarfs this Godzilla. Unfortunately though, the second Godzilla NECA is giving us is double this size, so he's going to dwarf Trespasser, so we're not ever going to get one that will be in scale with our Pacific Rim figures. And here he is next to Cherno Alpha, and once again, I really don't think this Godzilla would stand a chance against his Pacific Rim counterparts. So overall, I am really impressed with what NECA did with this figure. Especially for the price point, it's fantastic. So I'm definitely going to give it a very strong recommendation. And as of right now, it's the best Godzilla figure we have on the market. And I've even seen some pictures of people taking the Destruction Pack little cheapo things you can find at Toys R Us and Target and taking the Mudos out of those, and they are actually okay in scale with this Godzilla, especially the Flying Mudo. But my big question with this figure is, give it another 6 months or so, how am I going to feel about it once I have the SH Monster Arts version in hand? Because I do intend to pick up that figure. And in the past, when I have two conflicting figures like that, I've done a figure wars. I've put the two figures up against each other and compared them. But I want to hear from you guys. Do you think that would be fair? Putting a sub $20 figure up against a figure that's probably going to be about 60 bucks. With a 3 times price difference in there, I really wonder how much of a difference it's going to be and if it's going to be able to be comparable. But let me know in the comments below. When that figure comes out, should I do a figure wars with the two of them? Or should I just do a review on its own? Make sure you follow me on Instagram, username Outside the Box Reviews. Also check me out on Facebook, link below. And until next time, this has been another Outside the Box Reviews. Stay tuned for more to come.